Hi, everyone. This is Kumar Data Train with Agile Meridian. And with me today is Michael Franz, who we've known each other for, I don't know how long now, 5 years or so, 6 years.
It's
been
more
a
like
while.
7 years, I think. Yeah,
7 years now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
7 years.
And we both met at one of my clients. You know, Michael was my client. He's far surpassed me since then. I actually remember when you said, "Hey, Kumar, I'm thinking of becoming a coach. What do you think?"
Yep.
I'm like, "Of course, you have to take a coach." But anyway, I'm digressing. So Michael and I thought we would put this series together on Scaled Agile Framework, and we're going to cover topics, all manner of topics as it relates to the Scaled Agile Framework. And we thought we'd start with the principles. But before we get too far, I want to give Michael a chance to introduce himself to you. Michael?
Yeah, as Kumar said, I'm Michael Franz. I'm an SPCT candidate currently, and working in the SAFe industry for the last seven and a half years, really. And so my focus has largely been in organizations these days at the portfolio level, the enterprise level, working, to help teams solve real problems, real pain points by applying Scaled Agile. And so that's kind of, my background and my perspective. I like to work at the people level. I'm what you would call a people coach, I think. And so that's where my expertise and my certifications are focused.
Yeah, I can certainly attest to that. Michael and I working together in that client organization several years ago. I was always struck by how pragmatic and personable Michael was and is. And I think that has a big impact when you're talking about transformation, right? So when you're talking about changing the way you're working and implementing some scary looking framework with all sorts of terms that you have no idea what they mean, it's good to have a friendly face to kind of guide you along and implement these in a way that's going to be effective. So today we're going to start with the first principle of SAFe, which is taking an economic view. What does that mean, Michael? What does it mean to take an economic view from a SAFe, agile perspective?
Yeah, it's the first one of the 10 scaling principles, right? And I think you can't really put which one's more important than the other, but it is critical. And it gets through the idea that we're going to start thinking about empirical evidence. We're going to start, when we look at delivery and we start thinking about all the things that we're doing, we want to make sure that the decisions we're making, the work that we're doing, and even the order that we're doing that work in, we really are applying some economic principles, right? The idea that there's a way to do this that's not reactionary, and it's not necessarily the highest paid person making the decision, right, or the squeaky wheel. We want to make sure we're moving to that economic view and that the decisions that we make reflect that.
Yeah, that's interesting. So when you say economic view, is that like ROI, KPIs, things like that? I mean, people do that now. How's this different?
Yeah, it can be. What we want to do is we want to kind of bring about the mindset that move away from the reaction at all levels, right? So at the portfolio level, we might be looking at KPIs, but are we looking at those KPIs at the program level? What are the right metrics, that we're looking at each tier of an organization, down with the teams? Then there's of course team of teams, the programs, and the portfolio. So I think yes, that's part of the discussion in some cases, but even more so than that is the idea that we're going to deliver something, right? And we want to learn something from that delivery and then apply that learning. And that also influences taking that economic view. Deliver, one of the ways we do that in SAFe is to deliver early and often, right? That incremental approach.
Yeah.
And it's just so that we can get that learning.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that. I want to ask some more questions about the early and often a little bit later in this. I just want to sort of dive a little bit deeper into the taking an economic view. So, like, say, for instance, you've heard of Costco, I'm sure, right?
Of course.
Yeah, and their $4.99 chicken that's been $4.99 for 25 years. Now, would you say that the leaders at Costco are taking an economic view when they continue to sell this chicken for $4.99, in spite of, I'm sure it's a loss leader for them?
Well, I think they would have to. I mean, there's more to that decision making than just the cost of the chicken, right? So they're looking, now we're getting into some of the other principles, but they're using several of these scaling principles to make that kind of decision. So is it an economic view? I would say yes. It may not be a positive economic view, but there are other things that they're doing there, right? So they're getting some kind of value add in addition to just the cost of the chicken, which is probably, to your point, a loss.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. So they're probably selling at a loss, but they're bringing people in, and people are buying their chicken. And when they go down the aisle to go get the chicken, they're buying other things along the way. And so the net benefit is positive for Costco, and so that's why they keep doing it. So, and I guess the simplest way for me to think about an economic view, or taking an economic view, even at whatever level you are in the organization, is the work that we're doing that's going to deliver some value to our customer. Is it going to cost more to deliver that value? And if so, is there another ancillary benefit from delivering the value, like with the chicken? Does that
Absolutely.
sound
And
like?
that's the real conversation that you're trying to have, right? Is because
Yeah.
some of those things, like when you think about incremental delivery and really incremental learning, right? And so you're taking that economic view principle and you're saying this might cost too much to do it, to build it this way. Can we build it small in a different way, or a smaller way? Or what are the tangible side benefits if we do this, right? Having those kinds of conversations is exercising this principle.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, so how do leaders, managers, what is their role? And when I say leader, I prescribe to the principle that there are leaders at all levels, right? Everyone's a leader in their own way. So how do leaders and managers embody an economic view? What do you look for?
Well, first and foremost is understanding the principle, right? Getting into the principle itself and understanding all the pieces and parts. There's several pieces there. The other part in scaling, we have particular ceremonies, if you will, practices that we put into place where this principle, it comes to life, and where the conversation collaborative with other leaders in that organization are able to ask the right questions, use some tools that are out there. We're going to talk a little bit later on, but there's some tools and some practices built into scaling that allow you to bring it out. So first and foremost, I would say a leader has to understand the principle. So dig in, do some research, understand this idea of an economic view. And then also, of course, understand how not to disempower it. How to it's easy to be reactionary. It's easy to be under pressure, making decisions in silos, and not doing that collaborative approach, the incremental approach. You can certainly fall back from that. So first and foremost, understand the principle, understand the ceremonies and the tools where it's used in scaling. I think that's your first step in embodying that economic view.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I'm a manager. And we're going to I'm going to ask the question differently than the way it's phrased in the on the screen here. So I'm a manager, and my boss says, here's what you need to build, and this is the due date, and your bonus depends on it. How do I embody an economic? I know that this thing that he wants me to build is not going to it's going to affect 10 customers, out of our customer base of 10 million. 10 people are going to use it, but it's what he wants or she wants. And I have this hard deadline, and I've got this thing to build, and I'm going to get bonused based on how well I deliver on this thing on time.
You could probably argue that is taking an economic view, because my paycheck is economically dependent on it, but that's probably not what the principles actually stand for. So yeah, I mean, you're right. Sometimes we know at the end of the day that is delivery sometimes that we have to face. I would say, when you take this principle, you're obviously trying to coach collaboratively, but you're trying to coach those people or help them understand, what are the elements here? Is this the right thing to work on? when you get down to some of the tools that are out there, we talk a lot about cost of delay, right? Taking an economic view brings out the thinking in SAFe, cost of delay. If I don't do this thing right now, what's the real cost to us? And one of the tools that we use in economic view, which I think we're going to talk about in a little bit, is the weighted shortest job first, right? It's an economical sequencing and prioritization tool that we use in SAFe to get through some of that. Someone's coming at you, I want you to do this, I think you should do this. We would boil that down into the elements of cost of delay, which is job time or job level of effort, criticality. Business value has got to be part of what's the real business value, right? It has to be part of those conversations. Risk reduction, opportunity enablement, another thing from the WSJF, the weighted shortest job first tool, is all of those are considered economical pieces and parts. What I would say is to not undermine, once again, the manager, the leader that's trying to embody this principle, understand the principle, understand the tools and scaling, and understand how do I, at what point do I bring it into the conversation and use it, right?
Yeah.
The collaboration. Does that make sense?
It does. And I'm thinking that if I'm that manager and this my boss has told me to deliver something in 3 months and it absolutely doesn't make any sense because only 10 customers will benefit from it out of our pool of 10 million in that scenario, the way I might embody taking an economic view is showing that to him that the business value of this feature is very small, and the cost of delay for something else might be much larger. That if I work on this and ignore this other thing that has a much higher cost of delay, that hey, if I do this first before I do this, then it's going to really cost the company money or market share, or we might get disrupted and replaced in the industry.
Yes.
That may be the way for me to embody this principle. Am I right?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. And I always like to say at that point is, listen, in this description that you've laid out for us, take it away from the one-on-one conversation, the power of weighted shortest job first, and many of the collaborative functions in Agile, safe or otherwise, is the collaborative conversation, right? It's the conversation that needs to be had. And when you get into a room with this one leader who's adamant, this is most important, you should go do this right now, and you get the other perspectives, right? You get the shared collaboration perspective with the business or technology or product or marketing, whomever the right collaborators are. Once you start having that conversation and you move away from instinct and you start saying, let's look at this economically, let's use this tool, you're going to be able to make that argument, to your point, I think, much stronger. It becomes empirical rather than I think so. My gut tells me, my instinct tells me. And that's really, and also, of course, there's safety in numbers, right? So the more people collaborating, it's not about you and your economic paycheck anymore. Hey, we all agree. We've come to a consensus around these elements of cost of delay.
Yeah, I suppose I forgot the bonus. So I might not get the bonus, but I might make the company more money in the end. So what's the likelihood that I'm going to have that conversation with my boss? We don't have to answer that here.
Right. That's one of those nerve-wracking ones.
Yeah, it seems like it's a kind of a cultural thing that certain things have to happen in order for managers and leaders to truly embody this principle. And so we're only on the first principle, and look at how much trouble we're having with it already.
Well, and you think about it, that my motivation as we go through this series is there's just not there's a lot of education out there, and if you know to go look for it, you can get yourself up to speed. First of all, a leader should be continuously learning, right? We need that. But that first step, if we can help people, what's the first step? Where is this principle, and how do I engage with it? Whatever their role, I think that's a success.
Yeah. Any other pitfalls you see that undermine this principle?
Not off the top of my head.
I mean, I think the scenario I laid out probably is the number one pitfall. It's like, this is just the way we've done things. Somebody makes the decision, somebody promises features to the customer, teams aren't consulted, and the features may have value to some small subset of customers, but may not benefit the company as a whole. Sort of that whole, the holistic thinking isn't there, the collaborative thinking isn't there. So yeah, cool. You mentioned early and often, and how that comes into play when taking an economic view. You want to elaborate that on that a little bit, Michael?
Yeah, and this is, I hinted at it earlier, but when you think about an economic view is, let's take a step back for a moment. If we think about our old SDLC days, right? Hey, we delivered great things in project management and SDLC, what we call waterfall today. We did that for many years, but the reality is, from an economics perspective, it's not as powerful as an incremental delivery. And here's the economics of it. If you deliver, if you do a project today and we go through our project approach, we get to a date, right? We have a date. That's when the project's going to be due. We're going to deliver it on that date. Whether we get into arguments of can we hit that date doesn't matter. At the end of the day, there's a date in the future, usually several months in the future, that we're going to finish a project and the business is going to get some piece of value. Big time. The biggest application of taking an economic view is shifting us to an incremental system that delivers little pieces, incremental value as quickly as possible, right? And when you think about economically, why is that important? It's exponential value realization. The clock starts ticking the minute we deliver a piece of value to an organization. Of that value is earning for the company, right? It's earning, it's providing value. And if you wait 6 months for the project to be finished, and that's when the clock starts ticking, we're missing out on all this opportunity value between now and the 6 months, right? And so incremental, if we're delivering on those shorter increments, we're getting something to the market quicker, and that clock is ticking sooner, and we're getting value economically stronger, exponentially over time. Because it's not a one-time delivery. Every time you deliver something for a business, every time it's used, you gain value. Well, that's the idea, right? And so when you think about taking an economic view, it's shift away from that longer term, those longer gates, and start building your products and services using, let's do this incrementally. Let's get something out there that they can start to utilize. Most importantly, so we can learn faster as well, because our feedback loop is tied to our delivery. So now we're not only are we taking an economic view, but we're also learning faster, which is also economically applied.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
That does make sense. I mean, learning and knowledge is such a big part of a viable organization today, because things change at such a rapid pace in the industry that if teams aren't learning and they aren't accumulating and sharing knowledge, they're going to fall behind pretty quickly. And so I like the idea of taking an economic view in the sense, in the context that it applies here, which is, hey, let's build small things faster, get feedback from them, and that'll help us guide us towards the big thing that we would have built 5 years ago, that would have taken 5 years to release.
Right.
And that way we can adjust and course correct and learn what people really want, and so on. And so we're always incrementally adding that value. I like that.
Yeah, I think that's the key learning.
And I suppose this type of this mentality, this mindset will come into play with leaders and managers in their decision making, right? They're gonna want to, if something has a lot of value but it's really big, it's going to take a long time to get that into the hands of the customer. The decisions that leaders and managers, product people will make is, hey, what can we get out in a month, or in 2 months, or in 3 months, and certainly no more than that. Ideally, no more than a month, maybe even 2 weeks, right? What can we get in the hands of our users to get feedback? And so we're taking this big thing and we're chopping it down into small things and getting it out there.
And there are so many different things that influence a leader away from what you described, right? So, well, that means we have to do more testing, and we have to do more of this and more of that, right? And how do we deliver in those increments? And they have big ideas, and it also takes smaller ideas, right? You have to get your big ideas into those smaller chunks so that you can deliver them in that way. And it's a challenge. It's a big challenge, because for decades we thought in projects big deliverables. That's how everyone has thought, and changing that mindset is where this principle really helps us. How do we do that?
So what are some, you mentioned WizJiff, way to shortest job first. I mean, I'm assuming that's part of the toolkit, right? So the
Yeah.
tools that people would use. You want to talk a little bit about that? You know, how do you use it? What are the parts to it? I
Yeah,
know you
yeah.
did before, maybe a little deeper.
Yeah, look, we hit on it a little bit. So weighted shortest job first is a key execution of the principle, right? We're going to take an economic view. We talked a little bit about, we're going to stop reacting. We're going to stop listening to the highest paid person. Let's move away from that and really apply a conversation, right? One of the things that we like to talk about in weighted shortest job first, WSJIF is the term we abbreviate it with, is it's not about the numbers so much that you come up with doing the process. It's about the conversation, right? It's about having that collaborative conversation, hearing out each perspective, whether it's business, product, tech, right? The SME in the room, the architecture, our architect group, whomever's in the room based on the type of work you're doing. It could be marketing, it could be HR, it doesn't matter where in an organization or the type of work. It's saying, listen, what's the cost of delay if I don't do this? And let's make some decisions based on that. Let's see what the right order of execution is. The assumption is we never not have enough work. There's always more and more and more work. Demand outstrips capacity. That's the world we live in. What we're saying is, okay, let's do this work in an order that makes sense, right? And so
Yeah.
those elements, we get into business value, we get into time criticality if there's a deadline, right? We get into risk reduction. If we do this work, it reduces risk on our system. We get into conversations. If we do this work, it's an opportunity. It enables something in the future, right? And then all of that is really the divider there is level of effort, job size, right? How complex, how big, and that's how when you think about agile's lean, and we think about vertical small slices. That's the secret sauce in
Mhm.
in cost of delay. Let's do small important things before we do large important things, because we want that incremental value. We want the incremental learning to hit the market first, to reach the end of delivery first, so we can learn, so we can immediately start getting value. So when you think about take an economic view, that's the primary tool we use to get those conversations going and scaled.
Yeah, and I imagine that you probably lean towards small important things most of the time, right, over large important things. Only
Absolutely.
because the economics for a large important thing, you wouldn't be able to realize the value for so long, and the cost of delay on small important things would maybe outweigh this large important thing.
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
whenever you have something where that's bigger, and relatively speaking, complexity is higher, right? And so the
yeah,
unknowns, there's more unknowns. Accuracy is severely diminished the
right.
bigger something is. And and so what we're trying to do also is get lower defects, higher quality. All of that feeds into using a cost of delay and an economic view.
Yeah, it helps you de-risk your projects or your products that you're building by getting that fast feedback and making sure you're
Yeah.
working on the most important things. Good stuff. So if someone were to hey, they watch this video like, yeah, this is interesting. I want to take an economic view with the things that I am responsible for. Where would I go to learn more besides calling you or maybe me?
Yeah, right. Well, first and foremost, the scaledagileFramework.com, we're talking safe material here. So the framework is free. The website's free. If you were to go up there and on the big picture, you could actually click on WSJF. You could click on the
The
principles.
principles.
Obviously, go
Yeah.
straight to the safe principles, principle number one. And there's a plethora of information, industry vetted, tested and used information out there. Once again, scaling, they're a wonderful aggregator. They've brought all of these thought leaders together into their framework. But I would say probably Don Reinersten in the Principles of Product Development and Flow. That book is, now understand, you're going to need some caffeine. That's a deep book. I've never read it cover to cover myself. I read chapters out of it. I've got to cherry pick them to solve it. It
Yeah.
is a very science book, but it is phenomenal. It's kind of
Yeah.
the source of this thinking. So if you think about flow and the cost of delay, he really gets into the science of that. If that's the level of detail that you want, that's where I would encourage leaders, people who want to make a difference and leverage this principle. That's how I would encourage them to do so.
Yeah, that's really good feedback, and we'll put the links in the show notes below. So just look for those, and you can contact us if you want more information as well. I mean, we're both SBCs. Michael Franz is an SBCT candidate, which means that he's going to be able to, do more than I do, right? He certainly
That's the
has.
theory. It's a long journey. It's a journey to become candidate. Doesn't mean for sure. There's an
Yeah.
effort there. There's a journey there. But I'm excited to be on that journey.
I just realized I wanted to follow up on one thing you said. It's a collaborative thing going through the way to shortest job exercise, and sort of getting the group of experts to weigh in on the elements of the cost of delay and the job size and things like that. What typically are the roles that need to participate in this type of an activity?
Yeah, well, it comes down to, you really want representation from the business, right? So the business stakeholder, the product. If you have a product organization that kind of helps business realize what they want and need, and helps design. And then, of course, technology. If it's a technology effort, right, it's based on the type of work you're doing. You need that representation as well. Generally,
Yeah.
the three areas or of expertise there. If the work is, you might need an architect there. It just depends on what kind of work you're doing, the
Right.
feature level. But yeah, absolutely, you'll want that collaborative
The
team there.
representation from the different groups that represent the type of work that's being done. So
Absolutely.
making it contextually relevant. All right.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think this was great. We've got one principle. We've got 9 more to go, plus other topics around SAFe. Anything you want to end with, Michael?
No, I just appreciate the opportunity. Thanks, Kumar.
It's great. I love talking about this stuff. So we'll have the next one here real soon. Thanks for watching. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.